Veronica Hayes owned a billion-dollar empire, commanded boardrooms with a single glance, and lived in a pristine house where everything had its place, and silence was the only constant. But every Christmas Eve, she sat alone. The same dining table, the same crystal glass, the same emptiness that success couldn't fill. She'd built walls so high, even she'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. Then came the knock, hesitant, almost apologetic. A man with tired eyes and hands rough from work stood at her door, his daughter clutching a wooden box wrapped in newspaper. They lived next door, he said, just wanted to share a little joy on Christmas Eve. She nearly closed the door. But something in the child's crooked smile, something in the way this struggling father looked at his daughter like she was his entire world, cracked something inside Veronica she thought had died years ago. What she didn't know was that opening her door that night would shatter everything. Her carefully constructed life, her untouchable reputation, and the lie she'd been telling herself for 20 years. The world was about to find out that even the coldest heart could thaw, and some people would do anything to stop it. The December wind rattled the windows of Veronica Hayes's house, but inside, everything remained perfectly still. She sat at her dining table, one that could seat 12 but had only ever held one fingers wrapped around a crystal glass filled with wine she barely tasted. Through the bay windows, she could see the neighborhood transforming. Houses draped in lights, families gathering on porches, children running through yards dusted with fresh snow. Veronica had stopped decorating years ago. The house reflected what she'd become. Efficient, beautiful in its coldness, utterly empty. Not since the accident that had taken her parents when she was 16 had she allowed herself to hope for more. She'd built Hayes Industries from nothing, became the youngest woman to lead a Fortune 500 company by 35, tripled its value by 40. Now, at 43, she sat alone on Christmas Eve, surrounded by everything she'd achieved and feeling nothing but the cold. The knock came at 8:17. No one visited her unannounced. She considered ignoring it, but something about its gentleness pulled her from her chair. When she opened the door, cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of snow and cinnamon. A man stood on her porch, and behind him, a little girl peeked out with wide eyes. His jacket was worn at the elbows, his hands rough and calloused. The girl, no more than 7, wore a coat too big for her and clutched a small wooden box wrapped in newspaper and tied with red ribbon that had clearly been used before. "I'm sorry to bother you," the man said, his voice carrying a soft southern accent. "We live next door, the blue house. My daughter, Rosie, wanted to share Christmas with the neighborhood." He glanced down at the child, whose face broke into a gap-toothed smile. "We made some things, and we wanted you to have one." Veronica's first instinct was to say no, but the little girl stepped forward, holding up the box, and Veronica found herself looking into eyes that held no judgment, just the simple desire to give. "Daddy says everyone should have something nice on Christmas, even if they're by themselves," Rosie said. The words landed like a stone in still water. Even if they're by themselves. Was it that obvious? "That's very kind," Veronica heard herself say. She took the box, feeling its unexpected weight. "Thank you." "Daddy made it," Rosie announced proudly. "He makes lots of things." The man flushed slightly. "It's nothing fancy. Just something I do in my spare time." He met her eyes briefly, and in that connection, Veronica saw recognition not of her business success, but of her loneliness. "Merry Christmas," he said quietly. She should have closed the door, but instead, she found herself calling out. "Wait, I didn't catch your name." "Lucas," the man replied. "Lucas Bennett. And this is Rosie. Veronica Hayes." She hesitated. "Would you like to come in? It's cold out here." Lucas glanced at his daughter, then back at Veronica, weighing the invitation. "We don't want to intrude." "You're not." And as she said it, Veronica realized it was true. "Please, I have hot chocolate." Lucas nodded, and Rosie bounded up the steps. Veronica led them to her kitchen, all white marble and stainless steel. She heated milk, found cocoa powder, and soon they were settled at the kitchen island. "How long have you lived next door?" Veronica asked. "About 8 months," Lucas said. "We moved here from Georgia, needed a fresh start after my wife passed away 2 years ago." There was careful neutrality in his voice that suggested pain being held at a distance. Veronica understood that intimately. "I'm a mechanic at Jensen's auto shop," he continued. "Do carpentry on the side furniture, mostly." "Is that what you made?" Veronica gestured to the box. Rosie carefully unwrapped it, revealing a wooden box made from cherry wood, with dovetail joints and a pattern of leaves and vines carved into the lid. The interior was lined with blue velvet, with small compartments of varying sizes. It was beautiful, not flashy or expensive, but made with care and love visible in every detail. "Lucas, this is extraordinary," Veronica said, her throat tight. "Really?" "Yours has the most flowers," Rosie said. "Daddy said you needed something pretty." Veronica met Lucas's eyes. "That was very thoughtful." "You always look like you're carrying the weight of the world," Lucas said quietly. "I thought maybe you could use something that was just nice. No purpose except to be nice." The observation was so gentle that Veronica felt something crack inside her chest. This man she'd never spoken to had seen her in a way no one else had bothered to. They talked for another hour. Rosie chattered about second grade and her best friend Hannah, who could do cartwheels. Lucas shared how he worked 3 jobs to give Rosie a childhood not defined by loss, how his late wife Rachel had made him promise to keep spreading magic in the world. And Veronica, who hadn't shared anything personal in years, found herself talking about her parents' accident, about building her company from grief, about the loneliness of success. When they finally left, Veronica stood in her doorway watching them walk to their humbler house with its homemade decorations and warm lights. Through their windows, she could see a Christmas tree with paper ornaments. Stockings hung over a fireplace. It was everything she'd told herself she didn't need. But as she closed the door, she realized something had shifted. The silence felt heavier, the pristine surfaces felt colder, and the jewelry box felt like a question she wasn't sure how to answer. That night, Veronica didn't fall asleep thinking about work. Instead, she thought about a little girl's smile, about hands that built instead of managed, about what it might feel like to let someone in. The weeks that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. Veronica found herself at Lucas and Rosie's house more often than her own. She learned Lucas's schedule: early mornings at the auto shop, afternoons doing carpentry, evenings devoted entirely to Rosie. She started timing her arrivals home to coincide with theirs, offering waves that turned into brief conversations that turned into dinner invitations. Lucas was an excellent cook, making magic from simple ingredients. He'd apologize for humble meals, spaghetti with homemade sauce, chicken and rice, but Veronica found them more satisfying than any 5-star restaurant. Maybe it was the company, or maybe it was the love she could taste in every bite. She started contributing to groceries that appeared on their doorstep, with notes claiming she'd bought too much, gift cards to bookstores for Rosie, new woodworking tools for Lucas that she insisted were just sitting in her garage unused. Rosie had taken to calling her Miss V, a nickname that made Veronica's heart squeeze every time she heard it. The little girl would run to greet her with unself-conscious hugs, drag her to see new drawings, to help with homework, to judge competitions between stuffed animals that Veronica learned to take very seriously. And Lucas was becoming something she couldn't quite define, but felt more intensely each day. Their conversations deepened, moving from surface pleasantries to real discussions about dreams deferred, mistakes made, fears that kept them up at night. They'd talk long after Rosie went to bed, sitting at his small kitchen table with coffee going cold between them, and Veronica would find herself noticing things she had no business noticing. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the strength in his hands as he gestured while speaking, the quiet steadiness that emanated from him like a promise. She was falling for him. The realization came gradually, then all at once, during a moment so ordinary it shouldn't have mattered. They were in his garage, a cluttered space filled with tools and works in progress, and Lucas was showing her a rocking chair he was building for an elderly neighbor. His hands moved over the wood with such tenderness, explaining the grain and how to work with it. This is what love looks like, Veronica thought. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts, but hands that create beauty from raw materials, that build things meant to last. "You're staring," Lucas said, glancing up with an amused smile. "Sorry." She wasn't sorry at all. "I'm just impressed. You have real talent." "It's just carpentry," but he looked pleased. "It's more than that," Veronica insisted. She moved closer, running her own hand along the chair's smooth arm. "You put so much care into everything you make." Lucas set down his sandpaper, turning to face her fully. They were standing close now, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "I learned a long time ago that if you're going to do something, do it with your whole heart. Otherwise, what's the point?" "Is that how you live your life?" Veronica asked quietly. "Whole heart, all in?" "It's the only way I know how." His voice dropped lower. "Even when it's scary. Even when you know you might lose everything again." They were talking about more than carpentry now, and they both knew it. Lucas reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered there, gentle against her skin. "Veronica," he said, her name a question and a hope and a fear all wrapped together. "I'm scared," she admitted, the words barely a whisper. "Me too." Lucas's thumb brushed her cheek. "But I think I'd be more scared of not trying, of letting this pass by because we were too afraid of what might happen." She didn't know who moved first, maybe they both did. The kiss was gentle, tentative, a question being asked and answered in the same breath. Lucas's hand cupped her face with such tenderness it made her chest ache, and when Veronica's fingers curled into his shirt, holding on, she felt something break open inside her that had been locked away for far too long. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing unsteadily, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Well," he said, a smile in his voice. "That happened." Veronica laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. "It did." "Do you regret it?" She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "Not even a little bit." They took it slow after that, mindful of Rosie and the delicate nature of introducing new dynamics into a child's life. Lucas talked to his daughter carefully, making sure she understood that his feelings for Veronica didn't diminish his love for her late mother, that it was possible to honor the past while still reaching for the future. Rosie, with the adaptability and wisdom that children sometimes possessed, seemed to understand perfectly. "Does this mean Miss V is your girlfriend?" she asked one evening at dinner, looking between them with bright, curious eyes. Lucas glanced at Veronica, a question in his expression. She nodded, feeling her cheeks warm. "If that's okay with you," Lucas said to his daughter. Rosie considered this seriously, then broke into a grin. "Can she come to my school play next week? Hannah's mom is bringing her whole family, and I want to have a big family, too." Veronica felt tears prick her eyes. A family. When had she stopped thinking of herself as someone who could have that? "I'd be honored," she managed. And so their lives began to weave together. Veronica attended the school play, a chaotic production where Rosie played an enthusiastic pirate and clapped louder than anyone. She started keeping extra clothes at Lucas's house for evenings that turned into sleepovers on the couch after Rosie begged her to stay. She learned to braid hair and check homework, and read bedtime stories with all the proper voices. Lucas, in turn, became her anchor. On bad days at work, when the pressure felt crushing, she'd come home to find him waiting on her porch with takeout and a listening ear. He'd hold her while she vented, never trying to fix things but simply being present. He reminded her that she was more than her job, more than her success. For 3 months, Veronica allowed herself to believe it could last, to believe she'd finally found something the universe wouldn't take away. She should have known better. The photographer caught them at the park on a Saturday afternoon in early March. It had been one of those perfect spring days. Rosie had begged to go to the playground, so they'd packed a picnic, sandwiches, and fruit and cookies. Veronica had finally learned to bake without burning, and spent the afternoon watching Rosie swing and climb. Veronica had been pushing Rosie on the swings, laughing as the girl shrieked, "Higher!" when she felt Lucas's hand slip into hers. It was such a simple gesture, his fingers intertwining with hers, but it made her heart stumble. She'd turned to smile at him, and he'd leaned in to kiss her temple, gentle and sweet and so full of affection. She hadn't seen the camera, hadn't noticed the man with the long lens positioned across the park. It wasn't until Monday morning, when her assistant knocked on her office door with an expression of barely contained panic, that Veronica understood what had happened. "You need to see this," Patricia said, laying her tablet on the desk with careful deliberation. The headline screamed across the gossip site's homepage. "Ice Queen thaws, Hayes Industries, CEO spotted with blue-collar boyfriend and his daughter." Below it, a series of photos. Veronica and Lucas holding hands, Lucas kissing her temple, the three of them looking for all the world like a family as they shared their picnic. The article was worse than the photos, full of barely veiled judgment about the unlikely pairing between a billionaire CEO and a struggling mechanic. Speculation about whether Veronica was slumming it or if Lucas was a gold digger, and cruel commentary about whether she was trying to play house because she'd been too focused on her career to build her own family. Veronica felt cold spread through her veins. This was what she'd been afraid of, not the judgment itself, but what it would do to Lucas and Rosie. "The board is meeting in an hour," Patricia said quietly. "They're concerned about the company's image." The meeting was exactly as brutal as she'd anticipated. Board members, men in expensive suits who'd never had to choose between personal happiness and professional success, showed her more articles that had cropped up overnight. Social media was having a field day with the story. "This is a distraction the company doesn't need," Harold Winters said. He was the eldest board member, old money and older values. "Our investors want stability, not tabloid fodder. My personal life has nothing to do with my ability to run this company," Veronica said, keeping her voice level. "Except it does, when it becomes public." Margaret Chen, the CFO, at least had the decency to look apologetic. "The stock price dropped 2 points this morning. Because I was photographed at a park with someone I care about? Because you're involved with someone whose financial situation could be seen as a liability?" Harold cut in. "What happens when he starts making demands? When he expects you to bankroll his lifestyle?" "Lucas would never," Veronica started, fury rising. "You don't know that. You barely know him." Harold leaned forward. 6 months ago, you'd never even spoken to this man. Now you're playing stepmother to his child. It reflects poorly on the company." The argument went in circles for an hour. Finally, Harold laid down what was clearly an ultimatum. "We're not asking you to end the relationship, but we are asking you to be more discreet. No more public outings. Keep your personal life private, or step down and let someone with better judgment take over." Step down. From the company she'd built with her own hands, that she'd poured 2 decades into, that had been the only constant in a world that kept taking everything else away. They were asking her to choose her career or her relationship. She left the meeting without giving them an answer. The house that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a tomb. She sat at her dining table and tried to figure out what she was supposed to do. The knock came just after sunset. She knew before opening it that it would be Lucas. He stood on her porch with his hands in his pockets, his expression guarded in a way she'd never seen before. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. She stepped aside. He looked around at the pristine surfaces and she saw him seeing the distance between their worlds in a way he hadn't before. "I saw the articles," he said. "Rosie's teacher mentioned them. Some of the other parents were talking." "Lucas, I'm so sorry," the words tumbled out. "I never meant for this to happen, for you and Rosie to be dragged into—" "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, looking tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. "But Veronica," They're saying terrible things. About me, about my daughter. One article implied I was neglecting Rosie by letting her get close to you. That's ridiculous. Anyone who knows you. But they don't know me, Lucas interrupted, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself. That's the problem. To the rest of the world, I'm just some guy trying to punch above his weight. And Rosie, she's just a prop in some story about you. She's 7 years old. She shouldn't have to deal with strangers picking apart her life. So what, we just give up? Veronica heard the desperation in her own voice. Let them win? It's not that simple. Lucas finally met her eyes, and the pain she saw there nearly broke her. Everything I do, every choice I make, I have to think about Rosie first. That's what being a parent means. And right now, being with you means putting her in the spotlight in ways that could hurt her. How can I choose that? How can you not? Veronica shot back. Are you really going to let fear make this decision? Let other people's judgment determine whether we get to be happy? It's not about my happiness, Lucas said quietly. It stopped being about that the moment I became a father. My wants, my needs, they come second to hers. Always. And what about what she wants? Rosie loves having me around. She's 7. She doesn't understand what this means, how much worse it could get. What happens when she gets bullied at school? When other parents whisper about us? When she Googles your name and finds articles calling her father a gold digger? He took a shaky breath. I can't protect her from everything, but I can protect her from this. The silence that followed was crushing. This was the choice, then the one she'd been running from her whole life. Choose to love and risk losing everything, or close herself off and stay safe. But she'd spent 27 years playing it safe, 27 years choosing security over connection, success over vulnerability, walls over windows. And what had it gotten her? A beautiful house she hated coming home to. Christmas Eve spent alone, wondering what the point of any of it was if there was no one to share it with. No, she said, finally, the word quiet but firm. Lucas blinked. What? No, Veronica repeated, louder this time. I'm not doing this. I'm not letting fear make this decision. I'm not walking away from you and Rosie because the world has opinions about us, and I'm not letting you walk away either. Oh, Veronica, listen to me. She moved closer, taking his hands in hers. You're right that Rosie has to come first. You're absolutely right about that. But do you know what I think would hurt her more than anything else? Growing up watching her father give up on happiness because he was too scared to fight for it. Learning that love is something you run from instead of toward. Being taught that what other people think matters more than what we feel. It's not that simple, Lucas said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. Yes, it is. Veronica squeezed his hands. It's terrifying and messy and might blow up in our faces, but Lucas, I have spent my entire adult life playing it safe, building walls, convincing myself I didn't need anyone because needing people meant they could leave, could die, could hurt me in ways I might not survive. And it worked. I survived. But I wasn't living. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you. The words came out fierce, definite. I love you, and I love Rosie, and I'm not going to let a bunch of strangers with internet access take that away from me. From us. I'm afraid of going back to the way things were before you knocked on my door. I'm afraid of waking up 20 years from now and realizing I let the best thing that ever happened to me walk away because I was too scared to fight for it. Lucas was staring at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. You love me? Yes, you idiot. Veronica laughed, the sound watery but genuine. I love you. I love the way you make breakfast for Rosie, even when you're exhausted. I love how you build things with your hands and put your whole heart into every piece. I love that you kept your promise to your wife, even when it must have been impossibly hard. I love that you see me not the CEO, not the success story, just me, and somehow think I'm worth your time. Veronica. Her name on his lips sounded like prayer, like promise. So here's what I'm going to do, she continued. Tomorrow I'm calling a press conference. I'm going to tell them exactly who you are, not some caricature they've created, but the real you. A man who works 3 jobs to give his daughter a good life, who builds furniture for neighbors who can't afford to buy new, who gives Christmas gifts to lonely strangers because his late wife made him promise to keep spreading magic in the world. She took a breath. Promise. And I'm going to tell them that yes, I'm in love with you, and that anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. What about your board? Your company? I'll handle them. And she would. I'm not giving you up, Lucas. Not for them, not for anyone. Unless, she faltered, suddenly uncertain. Unless you don't want this anymore. If you really think we should end things, if you believe that's what's best for Rosie, then I'll respect that. But don't make that decision out of fear. Make it because it's actually what you want. Lucas stood frozen for a long moment. Then, finally, he moved. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite the calluses, and when he kissed her, it tasted like salt and hope and second chances. I don't want to end this, he whispered against her lips. God, Veronica, I don't want to end this. I'm just so scared of getting it wrong. You're not failing her. Veronica pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. You're showing her what it looks like to be brave, to choose love even when it's hard. That's the best gift you could give her. What if it gets worse? Then we'll deal with it, together. She emphasized the last word. You don't have to do this alone anymore, Lucas. That's what this means. Whatever comes, we face it as a team. She felt the moment he surrendered, the tension draining from his shoulders as he pulled her close. I love you too, Lucas said. In case that wasn't clear, I love you so much it terrifies me. Veronica smiled, feeling tears finally spill over. Good. That's how I want you, terrified. And here anyway. The press conference 3 days later made national news. Veronica stood at a podium in Hayes Industries' main conference room, facing a sea of reporters with cameras flashing, and refused to let her hands shake. I've spent most of my adult life trying to be perfect, she began. Perfect CEO, perfect image, perfect control over every aspect of my existence. And I was very good at it. Good enough to build a company worth billions, to earn respect in an industry that doesn't give it easily. But perfection is a lonely way to live. It means never letting anyone see the parts of you that aren't polished, never admitting you might need something you can't provide for yourself. She paused, letting the words settle. Then Lucas Bennett knocked on my door on Christmas Eve with his daughter and a handmade gift, and everything I thought I knew about strength got challenged. Because real strength isn't refusing to need anyone. It's admitting you do, and choosing to be vulnerable anyway. It's a single father working 3 jobs to give his child a good life, while still finding time to give gifts to lonely neighbors. It's a 7-year-old girl who can look at a stranger and see someone who needs kindness. It's choosing to love after loss, to hope after heartbreak. The room was silent now, every reporter leaning forward. So yes, I'm in a relationship with Lucas Bennett. He's a mechanic and a carpenter, a widower and a single father, and the best man I've ever met. No, he's not wealthy or famous. What he is kind, hardworking, devoted to his daughter in ways that inspire me every day to be better than I was. And I love him. Questions erupted, but Veronica held up a hand. I'm not here to debate the validity of my relationship or justify my choices to people who don't know me. I'm here to draw a line. My personal life is not public property. Lucas and his daughter are not characters in a story for your entertainment. They're real people who deserve privacy and respect. Miss Hayes, what about concerns that your relationship represents a conflict of interest? A reporter in the front row stood up. There is no conflict of interest, Veronica said firmly. Lucas has no involvement in my company, no financial stake in its success, and no interest in anything except building a life with me. What about the board's concerns? Veronica allowed herself a small smile. The board works for me, not the other way around. I founded Hayes Industries. I built it from the ground up. And I will continue leading it while also having a personal life, because I'm a human being, not a corporate robot. If the board can't accept that, they're welcome to find other employment. She fielded a few more questions before ending the conference and walking out with her head high. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. "We watched. Rosie says you were braver than any superhero. I agree. Love you." The fallout was intense but manageable. Social media exploded with takes, think pieces appeared, and yes, the stock price took another hit. But it stabilized after a week, and when the quarterly earnings came in stronger than projected, even Harold Winters had to grudgingly admit that her personal life hadn't destroyed the company. More importantly, the media frenzy eventually died down. Better stories came along. Lucas and Rosie learned to navigate the occasional photographer, and Veronica learned to set boundaries with work, leaving at reasonable hours, taking weekends off, remembering that life existed outside conference rooms. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, but they worked through it together, learning to communicate, to trust that what they had was stronger than whatever outside forces tried to tear it apart. The following Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after Lucas and Rosie had knocked on her door, Veronica stood in their kitchen now, since Lucas and Rosie had officially moved in 3 months ago, and watched snow fall while the scent of cookies filled the air. Real cookies this time, made from Lucas's late wife's recipe. The house looked different. Where once there had been pristine surfaces, now there were Rosie's drawings on the refrigerator, Lucas's tools in the converted garage workshop, family photos scattered everywhere. The dining table regularly hosted friends and neighbors. The silence had been replaced with laughter, with music, with the comfortable sounds of people actually living. "Miss V!" Rosie came running in, wearing her new holiday dress. "Can I answer the door when people arrive?" "Of course, sweetheart." Veronica bent to kiss the top of her head, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. Lucas appeared in the doorway, looking handsome in the green sweater she'd bought him. When he smiled at her, Veronica felt the same flutter she'd felt that first night. "Everything ready?" he asked, sliding his arms around her waist from behind. "Almost." Veronica leaned back against him. "Are you sure you're okay with this? Having all these people here?" "This was my idea, remember?" Lucas pressed a kiss to her temple. "You wanted a quiet evening, and I convinced you we should throw a party." It was true. Lucas had suggested hosting a Christmas Eve gathering, inviting neighbors, friends, colleagues. He'd wanted to recreate that feeling of community that had driven him to knock on doors a year ago. The doorbell rang, and Rosie went racing to answer it. Lucas turned Veronica in his arms. "What?" she asked. "Just thinking about last year. How different everything was. How scared we both were. And now?" "Now I'm still scared," Lucas admitted with a crooked smile. "Scared I'll wake up and find out this was all a dream. Scared I don't deserve to be this happy." Veronica silenced him with a kiss. "We deserve this. All of it. The happiness, the fear, the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of building a life together. We deserve it, Lucas." "Yeah," he agreed. "I'm starting to believe that." As the evening unfolded, Veronica moved through rooms, humming with life and conversation and laughter. She helped serve food, refilled drinks, made introductions between people from different parts of their life, and marveled at how natural it all felt. This was community, not transactional networking, but real connection between people who genuinely cared about each other. Later, after most guests had left, they gathered around the fireplace. Rosie, tired but happy, curled up between them while someone played guitar and everyone sang carols. Veronica found herself joining in, her voice blending with Lucas's, with Rosie's enthusiastic contribution. When midnight approached and the last guests departed, the three of them stood on the porch watching snow fall on a street sparkling with Christmas lights. Rosie was half asleep on Lucas's hip, and Veronica stood close enough that their shoulders touched. "Merry Christmas," Lucas said softly. "Merry Christmas," Veronica echoed, and meant it in a way she never had before. They headed inside to put Rosie to bed. Tomorrow they'd clean up, return to routine, face whatever the new year would bring. But tonight was perfect. Later, in their own bed, Lucas pulled her close. "Thank you." "For what?" "For opening the door. That first night, and every night since. For being brave enough to let us in." Veronica smiled into the darkness. "Thank you for knocking. For refusing to let me stay locked away. For showing me what I was missing. We're good together," Lucas said. "We're better than good," Veronica corrected. "We're real." As she drifted off to sleep, surrounded by evidence of their blended life, Veronica thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. Successful and lonely, convinced that the safest way to live was to never risk caring too much. That woman had been waiting alone on Christmas Eve when a single father and his daughter knocked with a handmade gift. And in accepting that gift, in choosing to open her door and her heart, she'd discovered what she'd been missing. A family. Not the one she'd lost, but one she'd chosen, one she'd fought for, one she'd built from trust and courage. The gift Lucas had brought wasn't a jewelry box. The real gift had been possibility of connection, of love, of a life that was messy and complicated and absolutely worth every risk. He'd given her hope when she'd forgotten how to hope, companionship when she'd convinced herself solitude was strength, and a family when she'd stopped believing such things were meant for her. They'd both been scared of taking this chance. But they'd done it anyway, and that courage had transformed everything. The CEO who'd waited alone every Christmas had found her family. The single father had found a partner. The little girl had found the extended family she'd wished for. And on this Christmas Eve, 1 year later, none of them were alone. The jewelry box Lucas had made sat on Veronica's dresser, still beautiful, still treasured, but no longer the most precious gift. The most precious gift couldn't be held in your hands. It lived in moments like these, in choosing love over fear, in opening doors instead of building walls, in having the courage to believe you deserved happiness even after loss. That was the real gift. That was the magic, not in perfect moments or fairy tale endings, but in the beautiful, messy reality of building a life together, in being brave enough to knock on closed doors and generous enough to open them. Veronica had taken that risk, and while the future remained uncertain, she knew one thing absolutely. She would never regret opening her door that Christmas Eve. Would never regret choosing love over loneliness, vulnerability over safety, a full messy life over an empty, perfect one. The woman who'd waited alone every Christmas had finally found what she'd been waiting for. And it turned out the answer had been right next door all along, wrapped in newspaper and carried by hands that built beautiful things, just waiting for the courage to knock. All she'd had to do was open the door,